All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, I've got Dopamine Nation up behind me and some physiology of the brain books. Uh, so you wanted to talk about dopamine today and motivation and kind of piggybacking on some of the other stuff we've been talking about, like regret and everything. I'm assuming
Yeah.
it's all connected. But we also had the Trump speech last night. We might do a little. You haven't watched any of it. I've only watched
Hmm.
some of it because we're both burning candles at both ends right now. So we might do a little live react to some of that until we get bored or run out of time. So,
With the idea of this is how you react without overreacting, which is kind of the genesis of what we've talked about dopamine before. You've gone over the witchcraft a little bit of, what it is, how it works, and in the guise of what we try and talk about, which is there are no bad feelings. There are just bad ways to react to your feelings. There are
mhm.
bad ways to use your feelings. And this is something that has been noodling around in my brain for a while because as Ben Shapiro rose to more bipartisan prominence, if you will, because if you're a conservative and you listen to consume that kind of media, you've known who Ben Shapiro is for a while, but he kind of crossed over some years back right before the Daily Wire started, and more normie or lefty kind of people started to figure out who he was as well. But famously or infamously, one of his catchphrases was "Facts don't care about your feelings."
Hmm.
Yeah, except, and I think even he has started to recognize this, is that feelings don't care about your facts. So the inverse is also true, which is a problem. Um, and is much as I don't like it. So on um when I my short-lived blog and then my name on Twitter was Mr. Nobody, because the whole concept was it shouldn't matter who I am. What should matter is the argument. Well, yeah, but you're a person talking to people.
Hmm.
You have to take that into account. As much as you might not like it, it's still true. You still have to make an emotional appeal to get someone's attention. The problem is if it all stays on emotion. And that was one of the kind of the genesis of, hey, we should talk about dopamine, is because I've heard a number of righty space, and not even righty, but even some members of what is being called the new right, who aren't really right, like Dave Rubin. He's not a conservative. He's just not a lunatic leftist,
He's
right?
gotten pretty conservative though.
He's becoming more
Yeah.
so, but that's one of the first names that popped in my head. But even like Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin, um, Bill Maher, even, who has been John Stewart, sometimes takes it to the left of, you guys are acting like lunatics. But so these people aren't on the right. They're just, wow, you guys have gone too far. And I've heard a number of them point out, isn't it interesting that the resistance, as they like to style themselves, is so much more subdued than it was in 2016 when Trump was inaugurated in his first term, and there was a huge protest at the inauguration. While all the inauguration parties were going on, there was also this very sizable protest march against him, primarily a woman-led thing, and then very quickly uh, that escalated. That kind of stuff still went on, and then you fast forward to the big stuff, which was the Summer of Love in 2020. Yes.
Yes, this
Yeah.
this 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 is the meme created by Colin Wright, who is a biologist that kind of gained prominence during the "What is a woman" discussion. But yeah, he's a typical what we would have called in the '90s, same as me, a liberal, and he's sitting there in the middle while the left is way, way, way far to the side going bigot.
Yep.
And I mean that's what you're talking about, the new right, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that's a better example of that. And he made that meme made famous by Elon Musk because he retweeted it. And if Elon retweets something, billions of people see it. But it's yeah, that's how I felt kind of. I just got around to it in a different way because I was working in the sports industry, and the Colin Kaepernick stuff was probably what really made me go, huh, what is this? Because everybody kept asking me about it. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Well, I don't know what I think. I think he's being disrespectful, but at the same time, it's a free country and whatever. And then I realized there was something underneath it. And then everybody starts saying, "Oh, you're," well, it's one of those that if I talk to someone who's MAGA, they're going to call me woke. If I talk to someone who's woke, they're going to call me MAGA. You
Hmm.
know, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I've talked before about my political philosophy began to be formed in eighth grade when my dad finished reading and then gave me Rush Limbaugh's first book.
Hmm.
And
Well,
so I'm
I remember
definitely
even
capital.
back when we were at Oklahoma State, and you would have me listen to Rush Limbaugh
Yeah.
and be like, "Oh, listen to this point he's making," and I'm just like, "Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's smart. It's a good argument, but
Yeah.
yeah."
But it, the point being, I'm a capital C conservative and have been for a long time. And, you know, I get the same treatment you get of if you criticize Trump, well, it can only be because you're, a grifter or a secret progressive, which I don't remember who I saw make this point on X the other day, that this is not helped by how many of the 2015, 2016 Never Trumpers, like Glenn Beck and Ben Shapiro, were a couple of very prominent big ones. And then during Trump's first term, they said, huh, he is not governing the way I thought he would. I'm I'm shifting. I'm becoming convinced.
Well, his
He's winning
current
me
vice
over.
president was one of those.
His current vice president, he got a
Yeah.
lot of flack, and the guy was like, "Yeah," and then he governed and he won me over. You know, there are a lot of the Never Trumpers like Bill Kristol and Jonah Goldberg are a couple of the biggies from the 90s and 2000s conservative punditry who are just as unhinged as the leftist Never Trumpers of everything Trump does is bad. And this sakis me back to the point I was making, which was I wonder how much of the lack of response is, you talked about burning the candle at both ends. How much of is it that the normie lefty who was caught up in this whirlwind of, you know, the CRT DEI racial movement, the hysteria of Trump is literally Hitler, democracy movement that whipped all of these people into a frenzy. How much of them are just burnt out? You can only ride an emotional high so long before you inevitably crash. And the
Hmm.
higher the high and the longer you sustain that, the harder the crash is going to be.
Yeah, and this is a line of thought I've had for a while because when we talk about, oh, are you going to do psychology or sociology or this or that? And I always like to bring up organic systems and how they all rhyme. So like exercise and cognitive behavioral therapy are actually kind of the same thing. So people say, "Oh, no, it's different because it's your mind." Well, yeah, there's different proteins involved in the development, but you're still getting improved synaptic development and there's a plasticity to the brain. So it actually creates tissue. It's not muscle, but it's creating tissue that sends you in the direction of the behavior that you're practicing. Just like with exercise. If I do bicep curls, eventually my biceps will be bigger because I have stimulated my body to create more tissue in that area. And now, when we talk about this, is going back even, I think this is Dawkins' biggest contribution is his idea of the meme, right? So we have our phenotype, which is how my genes express, and then my extended phenotype, which is how my expression of my genes affects the environment around me. And then we have the meme is how the collective extension of our phenotypes affect culture, right? And uh, so that motivation is being, so you want to talk about dopamine. I think, yes, I think you're absolutely right that in our body, it is a neurotransmitter. In the collective consciousness, which is the country, it is a blunting of that neurotransmitter in all the individuals. It's not going anywhere, right? If I drink and drink and drink, eventually I need to drink more to get the effect. And eventually I don't get the effect, I only get the negative, right? I think you're correct in that we're reaching that saturation point. We were artificially creating a like I said, the propaganda. We were creating the propaganda around this situation, and eventually reality wins. Eventually reality wins, and then you get that dump. You get that dopamine dump. But again, as a collective consciousness.
I think the key word there is artificial. And so I remember you bringing this up once a while ago. You brought up like a flyer for one of these family friendly drag shows in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And the group putting it on was not a local group. And you were rightly making the point that this is this is not something that is organic. This is an outside group purposefully coming into one of the reddest states in the union in the heart of the Bible Belt. You know, uh, we, uh, yes, when we went to college, it might be different now, but Payne County, I believe, still is a dry county on Sundays. You cannot sell even beer. I think you can sell beer now, but you couldn't even sell beer on a Sunday
Mm-hmm.
because they were still that, traditional. And and so you are purposely going in to pick a fight, to create a reaction, to provoke a counter reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember who I first heard saw make this point. But I think they were right, but they were also wrong because of what you said of it is a national issue because there are people forcing it to be a national issue. But anyway, this was someone on the right making the point of basically what I'm trying to say is, guys, calm down. Oh yes, the uh what's the Victoria and David Beckham from their reality show, and I think was this the scene where she was trying to say she was like she grew up middle class or something like that, and or she grew up poor, and he's
I,
like,
I've
dude,
never seen
I,
the show this came from, but I've just seen this meme come
I'm
around. Yeah.
mostly sure that's what this is because David Beckham did actually grow up dirt poor in the rough part of, the rougher working class areas of England. And his wife Victoria did not. She grew up comfortably and then very quickly rose to fame with the and wealth with the Spice Girls. And so that's where the meme comes from is them talking about that, him going, no, come on, honey. Be
Mhm.
honest, be serious.
Yeah, and
And
for those that were just listening and we kind of cut away real quick there, I put up a meme relevant to the conversation. I didn't expect you to comment on it right away, but it is from the show he was talking about, but it says, "I
yeah,
stand with Ukraine," and he's like, "Be honest." I am being honest. Okay, I don't care about Ukraine. I just hate Trump. Thank you.
exactly.
Yeah. And
It,
that's actually that is becoming tiresome because it's becoming more and more. I mean, just with the speech last night, the little of it I watched,
mhm,
he points to that in his speech. He says, I mean, there's nothing I'm going to say that make that side of the room stand up and clap
mhm,
just because it came out of my mouth, not
mhm.
because it's something they believe in or anything like that. It is because it came out of my mouth.
Yeah. Well, so back to the point I was making specifically, I don't remember who it was. They made the point of of how many righty punditry were making hay out of one of these family friendly drag shows in Portland, Oregon. Okay, Portland, Oregon is one of the most lefty, progressive, crazy areas in the country. I mean, arguably even more so than the Bay Area, than San Francisco, because there are at least areas of the Bay Area that kind of counterbalance and aren't as crazy as San Francisco proper. And this guy was making the point that, before the internet, this was something that would show up in the local newspaper and maybe get picked up by a state newspaper in Oregon, and it's a local and or state issue. But now because of the internet, because of at the time Twitter, everybody knows about it and everybody is freaking out. But here's where this person is wrong, which was to your point, okay, except we aren't the ones making it a national issue. It is being forced on us And so we have to respond. But again, to your point, yeah, but what is that response? Because these people are trying to provoke a reaction
Mm-hmm.
because they want the counter reaction. And all of that is predicated on hijacking the logic centers of your brain
Mm-hmm.
so that you just act on emotion. This is why I spent time way early on in one of our first episodes talking about the French dude whose name I just forgot, um, who was basically the author of crowd psychology.
Oh,
And
Le Bon?
yes, Le Bon.
Yeah.
And he did it by thinking about studying and writing about the French Revolution
Mm-hmm.
and how that so quickly spun off the rails and why that was. How do you end up at a point where you have a mob screaming for blood and then no amount of blood will satiate them? And so that's when it begins to eat its own. That's why Robespierre, the guy who started the terror, kind of ended the terror because he ended up in the guillotine as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's
Well,
because
well, this
of
is something that
this.
worries me about the current situation because you're correct. It seems like the left has lost its fervor. And most of it is because most of them are kind of like me, where it was like, wow, it just took a ridiculous moment. My mom is pretty damn liberal, and the trans issue kind of gets her, a little bit thrown off, right? Because it's just so ridiculous. We don't have to accept that someone playing pretend is an actual thing, right? We can accept that they can live their life however they want, but don't touch my kids, okay? That kind of stuff. And it has just been going so far that I think that's what caused the fatigue was, okay, I want to support this side. I don't want to support this other side, but there's so much that I don't support that's going on over here. So I'm instead of flipping sides, is more of a I checked out kind of thing, kind of mentality. And but I'm worried on the other side. Now we're getting a fervor because look at what's happening with the Epstein documents, right? This lady, Bondi, she just got into her job and maybe she made too many promises, but at the same time, she Elon talks about this on Rogan that basically she's the captain of a ship that used to be her enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to expect her to be able to do everything with that ship that you can do as a captain? No, not now. Give her time.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's already calling for her resignation because they're not happy. And it's like, I think the fervor, it hasn't just gone away. I think it's switched sides. And the fervor causes you to eat your own at some point.
Yes, and that is a major problem in actually achieving the things you want to achieve. When I see so many people who I generally respect and who I think generally have good insights on these things, and yet when you have certain triggering, to use the woke's terminology, when you have certain triggering instances like the Epstein list, because for so many people that is um a totem of what is so wrong with our culture, which is
Mhm.
that our leadership, our elites, are elitists and have no problem using and abusing the little people. And this is why I so often call them aristocrats, because they treat
Mhm.
the normal people as peasantry. They treat them as a medieval
Tools.
aristocrat would treat a peasant.
Well,
And
when I was in England, we were at Warwick Castle, and one of the floors in the castle that you can go through the tour had little plaques on the bottom, and it was the year and it was the date of when the castle defended itself against an invasion from neighboring feudal whatever they were at the time from one of their enemies. And I'm going through looking at the dates and kind of doing math in my head and distance and how far can you walk in a day and everything. Basically, that castle defended itself in as much time as it took the leader of that invading army to go back home, get more people, and then come back and attack. And I'm just like, yeah, that's how they treated people. They were basically throwing people at walls and hoping that somehow one of them punched through.
Mhm.
And, and it's just, it's disgusting.
So it's interesting. There's an interesting analogy there because very often, um, the the first ones to the wall were volunteers. Why the hell would you volunteer for something like that? Well, because that was your only way up.
Hmm.
So yeah, one out of 100 chance, maybe one out of 1,000 that you live, but it's 1,000 out of 1,000 that you continue to live in poverty and oppression if you don't. And
Hmm.
the rewards were so high that if you manage to achieve, I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard people speak highly of it, and I know what it's about. It's Squid Game.
Mm. But yeah, that's a good show. It's a good show.
Um,
I usually don't jump on the hype, but I went ahead and watched it, and it was worth the hype.
that is from everything I know about the show. That is aristocrats playing with the lives of peasants because they can, and because they get some advancement and some satisfaction out of it. Which actually leads me to one of the things I wanted to talk about in this idea of dopamine chasing and short circuiting the logic centers of the brain. As a practical example of that is what just happened. Geez, was this just last week or 2 weeks ago? Zelensky in the Oval Office.
Last week.
Yeah, you know it. It's hard to keep track because again, the dopamine chasing, the the what is the top story keeps changing, and
Hmm.
I'll get to why that's a problem is one in a bit. Is one of the places I'm going here is the war in Ukraine is much more complicated than the screeching harpies on both sides would like you to believe. Is Zelensky this great war hero that the people who are attacking Trump paint him as? I'm doubtful. This is a comment I made on, I don't remember if it was on X or on YouTube, for when Konstantin Kisin came out and said, I have to apologize because, and he should know better, frankly,
Hmm.
because he's had this happen to him, as he said in his YouTube video. It's only like a 7-minute video if you want to go
Yeah,
watch it,
yeah. Watch that one.
about what Zelensky did wrong and how he can fix it. But he opens that video and he made an X post about this of, I reacted too quickly from clips from the
Hmm.
from the
The
clips,
2 minute
but
clip. The very end of a 50-minute conversation where there was a lot of antagonism the other
exactly,
way.
you've
Yeah.
you've seen the 2-minute clip. Well, that that session, that media session was 50 minutes. It was almost a freaking hour, and
Hmm.
everybody is reacting to 2 minutes. And on the one side, you have Trump is a fascist bully who ambushed this great leader, war hero, who's valiantly leading his country, standing up against an oppressor. And on the other side, it's yeah, get him, America first, no more for blah blah, whatever on their side. And it's, guys, this was almost an hour long. How many of you have actually watched it? And
Hmm.
when Kissen watched the whole thing, he said, ooh, yeah, no, Zelensky was the one who screwed up here. And whatever you think of how it ended and what Vance and Trump said and how they said it, there was a long 40-minute or so build up to that blow up.
Hmm.
And
Well, I
whatever
mean, it
you think,
started from initially walking in without putting on a proper attire.
yeah,
I mean, it's going to the job interview in your shorts and a t-shirt and then blaming the boss that you didn't get hired.
yeah. And actually, I think that is part of the complication of this, which is, I remember when Zelensky was first elected, and because of when it happened, and it kind of coincided with Brexit, with Trump, with this kind of growing populist movement around the world, that, wow, maybe this is a Trump-like moment in Ukraine,
Hmm.
because he's an unknown. He kind of comes out of nowhere. He's a media celebrity. He's not a politician. Well, it doesn't look like that's worked out. But I remember the speculation at the time being, is he going to be a Trumpian type populist. And I think one of the complications and the problems in trying to evaluate the Ukraine Russia situation um is has Zelensky fallen into the trap of a lot of actor activists who conflate the role or roles they play with who they really are.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if because part of the point of all the Green Army shirts that he's always wearing is, hey, I'm one of you. And kudos to him. He actually did make a big deal about I'm not leaving Kyiv.
Mm-hmm.
When at the in the first weeks, first month of the war, it looked like Russia was going to take the capital. And Zelensky wasn't leaving. I mean, kudos to him for that. That was real, and he was really in danger. But he seems to have been trapped. He seems to have trapped himself in that role. And is that part of the problem here? Well, I don't know
Well,
because we can't
yeah.
talk about it without being, you're a literal Nazi or you're a literal communist or no. I'm trying to figure out this complicated situation so we can move forward.
No, it is part of the problem. Because he's not only in that role, but I mean he's as narcissistic as any other politician
Mm-hmm.
that's gotten to the top. And I mean, or any other actor. I mean, this is the problem with your discussion here is there are so many covariates that go along with it, and you don't make it that high as an actor or a politician or anything. I was talking about this with the client earlier. It even affected me in running a business because very shortly I became the face of the business, and I hated that,
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to just do really good job and people come, not have to like be the focus of attention. I wanted the business name. I wanted the gym to be the focus of attention. And, I'm just part of it because I do a good job. And that wore on me and that made it hard for me to do my job. Uh, well, people who love being the face have that. They have that ability to basically get energy from it. They have that extroversion. They get the dopamine hit from that. And Zelensky, I mean, he was an actor first, comedian, and then he's, you know, been the face of the world for a little bit now.
Mm-hmm.
And it did good. He did good by staying in Kyiv and doing that and adding morale to his country. But you also got to know when to turn it off. And that's where he's failing is he cannot turn it off for the betterment of his people. He should have showed up respectful, done the deal, and stopped the dying.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody knows it. But he doubled down. This is where I get a little pissed off. He doubled down afterwards because right after that meeting, there were impeachment calls in his home country, and he banned that political party when he got home. So yeah, you want to say, oh, everybody's calling Trump out for calling him a dictator. I'm like, not much less than Putin on the other side. You can write the same script and you wouldn't know which one it was because they're both doing it. And yeah, so it's yeah, he effed himself. I think that's why he's really come around because I think he figured it out. But
Well, because right after that, before going home, he stopped off in the UK and I don't
mhm.
remember what other places in Europe. And I think he may have realized, oh, wait, Europe isn't going to save me.
Yeah, well,
Europe,
especially
the
since
EU
they're
by
like,
itself.
we're gonna do all of these things, and then at the end of the speech of all the things they're gonna do, if the US does it, they need the umbrella. They
Mm-hmm.
need it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's the sad truth. And that's why everybody's like, oh, Trump's such a bully. It's like, but he's right.
Well, I've been harping since that meeting with in the White House in the Oval Office. Actually, it wasn't the Oval, but in the West Wing. Um, there are two big points about the Ukraine war that need to be for everyone who thinks that it's black and white, cut and dry. I think there are two big points that need to be hammered over and over by the people saying, no, it's more complicated than that, and we need to get a peace deal, even if it's not satisfactory, even if it means Russia gets at least some wins out of the deal. First of all, kudos. I have to go back to my kudos to Zelensky to now undo them because, yeah, he stayed in Kyiv. He made a big deal about that. That was huge for his people. That showed leadership. But a few months later, in the spring of 22, so just 3-ish months after the start of the war, there were some serious peace negotiations that were taking place in, I think, April of that year of 22. At that point, Ukraine had a lot of leverage because they had just blunted the initial assault when everybody, especially Russia, thought they were just going to steamroll over and basically install a puppet regime to get for Putin to get what he wants out of this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when that didn't happen, basically the Russians said, all right, we will sign a peace deal so long as you give us the big thing we want, which is you're not joining NATO or the EU. Sign a deal saying we won't do this and we will withdraw. And this is point number 2.
Yep, this is part of the equation that a lot of people aren't talking about. Luckily, because it's a weakness of mine, I follow business people that comment on some of these things, and I just made the comment about the U.S. umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
Why is Russia so bold? This, if you're just listening, is a natural resource value by country. That includes oil, rare earths, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Who's number 2?
The U.S. with 45 trillion estimated natural resource
Yeah, so that makes
reserves.
sense because we're a big country. We have a lot of oil. We have a lot of that. We have lithium in Idaho if we just take the
Mine it,
eyesore
yeah.
of mining it. Saudi Arabia is number 3, 34 trillion. Canada has a lot. They have a lot of oil. I mean, the same continent, it makes sense, right? Iran, China's only 23 trillion, so they're 1/3 of the number one, and the number one is
Russia,
by far.
by far 75 trillion
You can
to the
basically
US is
combine the
45
first two.
trillion. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And everybody thinks in terms of oil. US and Saudi Arabia, I mean, that's most of the world's oil right there.
Yeah. And a big part of that is geography. Not only is Russia freaking huge, but because it's so huge, it has a lot of varied geography. You have the Urals, you have the Caucasus, and all of the minerals that go along with having mountains. Then
Mhm.
plus you have all the vastness of Siberia. Um, it's and because of that, the second point that needs to be hammered for all the people making this so black and white and oh the US is the villain here, and I'm glad Musk has been uh posting about this lately because this is getting, to your point, getting a lot more eyeballs on it, is the EU has literally spent more money buying Russian oil and natural gas than they have given in aid to Ukraine. The EU, while they're shouting at us for being traitors and pro Putin and, you know, pro whatever you want to, negative spin you want to put on it, guys, you are literally funding both sides of this war.
Mhm. Well, not only that, and you wanted to talk about motivations, which is why you brought up dopamine. Dopamine is the motivation
Mhm.
neurotransmitter. If you're motivated to do something, it's because that is circulating through your system. Uh, we in 2021, with the transfer of power, stopped trying to be an energy leader in the world. And it just so happens a year later that another country capable of being an energy leader in the world thought they were invincible and can do whatever they want. That's why these policies are luxury beliefs, because it's okay, yeah, green world, we're going to save the planet. Not if we start a nuclear war, right? We're
Mhm.
going to save the planet. We're going to do all of these things. We're going to get rid of smog and pollution. But there's other things at play, right? And if we're not the energy leader, then the bad guy's going to be the energy leader. And when the bad guy's the energy leader, they're going to do whatever F they want. It's like being in an abusive household. That person has all the power. If they didn't have all the power, they wouldn't be able to do the abuse. And if you let them have the power, then you're going to be the subject of the abuse. Zelensky was kind of right when he said it's going to come to get you if you don't help me, but only if you do it in a way of weakness.
Mhm.
If you come in and say, "Okay, you got everything you wanted, please sign this paper," and then leave them high and dry, then yeah, it would just become lead to a cycle of being more bold, right? But if you come in and say, "Look, you did this, we can't take it back. Stop doing it. And guess what? Look at all the things we're doing to be strong, and we'll kick your ass if you do it again." That's a completely different argument, and that's where the people from our country were trying to come from. Hey, no, that's not going to happen again because of how we're going to do it. And Zelensky was playing the victim and saying, no, it's going to come for you too, just like it came for me. I mean, just like look at the call for elections in Ukraine. And what did Zelensky do in response? He came out and said, I will step down if such and such happens. No one asked you to step down. They asked you to have elections. There's a big
Mhm.
difference.
Mhm.
But he's playing the victim.
Mhm.
He's playing the victim. I'll do this sacrifice thing for my country if you would just do this for it and NATO come in and da 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 da. And it's like, no, no, no. Just have elections. Just do it. Let your own people decide. It's I encourage people to not only watch the full 50-minute press conference, but to watch Zelensky on Lex Friedman's podcast. He sat down for 3 hours with a podcaster, just like Trump did with Rogan or whatever. You can't fake it for 3 hours.
Mhm.
And he opened it up with, "Oh, I can't wait till Trump is president, and the inauguration, and maybe January 2025 we have a peace deal because and he came out like that." But then he kept digressing into basically a very narcissistic red line, I demand this for my country because I'm going to save it kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. When you told me to watch it, I think the way you phrased it is it's the other side of the coin of the Putin interview with Tucker Carlson.
Oh yeah, because his justifications for his demands are the exact same history lesson
Mhm.
that was given from the other side, only it's our guys that are the good guys.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're this stubbornness is all, and then that's why these things happen. That's why these land disputes happen, because history, right? The problem is it's one of those possessionist 9/10 of the law kind of thing too. Who's got it right now? Did they take it? Did they steal it? Did they conquer it? uh, yeah, we have to. That's where it becomes a nuanced argument. But no, I was not surprised by that press conference because I had watched that interview. I mean, even to the extent of, we talk about disrespect. He was lecturing Lex on respect because, for those that don't watch Lex, he's a I think he was a small child when he came to the States, but he's Ukrainian, but from the Russian speaking part of Ukraine. So he speaks fluent Russian and fluent English and very little Ukrainian. Well, I mean, Zelensky speaks fluent Ukrainian, obviously, fluent Russian, and very little English. And so he said, well, we have one language in common. Can we do this interview in that one language so all the nuance can come out? Because if we're going through a translator, it can't. And it opened up a 25-minute of the 3-hour lecture from Zelensky of how disrespectful it is to speak Russian in the conversation. And it's like, well, you want to talk about respect? You did it. You did it too to a podcaster.
Mhm.
not to a president of the most powerful country in the world, allegedly.
Yeah. And I have heard that before. I heard that from multiple sources, including people who have gone, uniformed people who have gone over to Ukraine before the war, who have been in had been in Ukraine to help train Ukrainian troops, because we have been doing that for years, um, to help train Ukrainian troops, and they made that point too, is don't call them Russian and don't speak to them in Russian. They don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Which
but
I understand, but you can't play the victim game in the other direction.
exactly.
Yeah.
But you, Zelensky, are the president of the whole country,
Mm-hmm.
which includes a large Russian speaking or a significant Russian speaking minority, ethnic Russian minority. Uh, What are you going to do with those people? Are you going to ignore them? Are you going to throw them out? So, yeah, I understand that, but you're also trying to, you're also supposed to be convincing.
Mm-hmm.
And at times that might mean speaking Russian,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because especially in that specific instance of, let me do what is the best I can, the best way to convince the American audience that this is why you should side with me, this is why you should support me, but also, hey, Russian speaking minority, you're part of the country too. I know we have this long running animosity towards each other, but you're still part of the country, and that's better than being with Putin, because,
You know,
and he won't do it.
and this actually speaks volumes because we've talked about tribalism before, and we've talked about it in depth with things like race and ethnicity and country and all of those things. Language is actually the biggest driver of tribalistic behavior. And maybe that's part of the problem, that there is a Russian speaking portion of the Ukraine and a Ukrainian speaking portion of the Ukraine, which is why it's actually a good thing that I don't know why you needed an executive order to do it, but Trump signed the executive order that English is the national language of the United States. I wonder if some of the fights in Canada between the provinces is because some of it's still French speaking and some of it's still English speaking.
It absolutely is, yeah.
It absolutely is. Language is actually one of the biggest drivers of division. I mean, the EU, how many fights are started because I can speak to this because some people in Germany think German should be the EU language. And, sorry, that's not going to go through because of history, but it's, but the French insist that French should be French, but everybody speaks English. And it's just like, well, maybe this is part of the division. Maybe you'd be more unified if you all decided on a language. But at the same time, whichever language didn't go through, that portion of the population is going to be bitter. Like if English came through as the EU language, the French and the Germans are going to be pissed off. But the Romanians are probably going to be fine. It's language is a huge divider. So maybe that's part of the problem, that there is a Russian speaking portion.
Well, and you used the T word, which reminded me, I just reposted something Gad Sad said today, and I'll try not to do this as a bad imitation of Gad Sad, but his voice is an earworm that gets in my head, and it makes me want to start trying to imitate his way of speaking. But he posted
That
today,
wasn't horrible. That
you
wasn't
might
horrible.
recall in chapter 7 of The Parasitic Mind, wherein I referenced a theory that posits that human reasoning did not evolve to seek truth, but to win arguments. Well, when you watched yesterday's reaction by the Democrats, it is a perfect manifestation of that insight. They are not animated by some deontological ideals. Rather, if their opponents cure cancer, they will scream that it is unfair to kill off cancerous cells. The inability of human minds to see beyond their tribal allegiance is a fundamental flaw of the architecture of our reasoning faculty.
Well, and then, you know, the right and the left speak different languages too, right? They talk past each other. They don't talk to each other. Uh, I see it in academia. Just within psychology itself, there's the cognitive psychs, there's the developmental psychs, there's the human factors, there's all of these different things. And I'm taking all of the classes because I want to be general. They all have their own language. I'm having to learn a new language like every other class, it seems like.
Mm.
And that's a struggle. That's the biggest struggle this whole time I've been back is learning these languages to realize what the hell they're even writing about, right? And you think of the human factors like engineers and the cogs and the learning and all of these, and they're always fighting. Every single one of them is like, oh, the behaviorists say this, but that's wrong. Oh, the psychoanalysts say this, and that's wrong because Freud's an idiot. Oh, all this, and it's like, if you just like smush it all together, it's going to be 90% the same. Just start speaking the same language.
And unpack a little bit more as a bit of a refresher where dopamine comes into this and where this because I think that's a lot of this tribalism is you get you get a spike of satisfaction
Mm-hmm.
or excitement or happiness. For those just listening, I'm using scare quotes here because one of our problems in the modern world, especially the westernized world, first world problem, is we have fundamentally failed to understand what happiness is, and we have conflated it with pleasure. And so if I'm not feeling pleasure 24/7, I'm not happy. No, that's not what happiness is. And if you go chasing after constant pleasures, you're actually going to crash and be unhappy. I mean, we talked about, last time, the time before, when I was talking about why I listened to Williamson and why using his background as an attack on the guy is absurd because he was a dopamine chaser and he realized I'm not happy, and he had the wherewithal to say why and how do I make this work.
Okay, so I brought up a little meme that'll get us to the point. It says it has the chemicals dopamine and serotonin, and it says actually we're the only two things that make you happy. It's a little more complicated than that, but it's a good little
It's the witchcraft 101.
yeah. And so the next picture I brought up is a synapse, which is the spot where two nerves connect, basically. Two neurons in a nerve connect. And there's a space in between them. It's like it is an electrical signal, but it's not. It's a chemical signal. It's both because it relies on charges and stuff, but we won't go too deep into that. But basically, if you're going, so we'll do top down. If you start in your brain and you're going down into another part of your brain or your body, this signal has to keep going from neuron to neuron to neuron to neuron to neuron, all the way down to where it's supposed to end. And dopamine is one of the chemicals that is a signaler. And depending on which chemical is released, it determines what the signal is and where it came from and everything. So it goes from one to the other, and then it goes back in or it gets eaten up by the body. Uh, and I use a general picture. This is not specifically dopamine, it just has a neurotransmitter, but that's how it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on what the chemical is, determines what the response or feeling is. And we have certain centers in our brain, the anterior cingulate for dopamine specifically, that are heavy in one versus another. And then there's some that come in and inhibit response, like GABA is the one affected by alcohol a lot. So if you have ever had the DTs after getting off alcohol for a while, it's because your GABA system's thrown off. So you're hyper excited, which is why you shake and you have the internal, palpitations and things like that. So depending on the neurotransmitter, depending on where it comes from, determines the feeling. And all our feelings come from these things. And there's only 20 that we know of, neurotransmitters. So the cocktail gets complicated. It's like having the world's banquet of food preparation. Like think of every type of food you can have in the entire world, but there's only 20 ingredients that can go into it. That's the way it is in our body, right? And dopamine shoots from one, gets into the receptor on the other, and goes down. And when that happens from the top down, you're motivated to do something. And then when you do the thing, you get another kick of it to reward you for it. And then the serotonin centers come in and kind of, I'm going to oversimplify it, but that's okay for the discussion, creates a sense of satisfaction. And so anything that makes you feel good is going to be driven by dopamine. Now, where does this get into politics and tribalism? Belonging makes you feel good.
Mhm.
Belonging makes you feel really good, and that's important because we talked about it in our last episode, I believe, how important other people are for our survival. Because I don't know about you, but if I was to face off against a bear, bear's going to win. And almost every animal in the animal kingdom is that way. But together, we do a pretty damn good job. And that's the strength of humans. We developed our big brains. Dunbar, the only person with a number named after him that is still alive, uh, he he's the one that has the 150, 15, 5. Uh, his hypothesis on our big brains, and it's very well backed by the neuroscience of how our brains work, is our brains are so big because we can't just account for ourselves. I have to account for you and your feelings. I have to account for my wife and her feelings, my son and his feelings, all my clients, everybody around me, the checker at the grocery store. I have to account for all of these things. And that takes a lot of gray matter. And so it makes sense. Now, dopamine is important for development too. Your nervous system. Okay, so here's the example that this is where I want to fight with Neil deGrasse Tyson from his last book. Is there are if you make a shot in a basketball game, dopamine flies through your whole system and it encourages your system to do the exact same thing next time. That's one of the ways we learn in motor learning is it does that and then acetylcholine, which is another neurotransmitter, comes in the backside and says reinforce that. So when you have automaticity, say you're playing the piano, isomorphic, when your fingers are doing what they're supposed to do without you having to think, because that process happened. Now, on the social scale, these people that are just like automatons for their party and tribe, they've been chasing that dopamine hit of belonging for so long, it's automatized. It can be changed, which is what's frustrating about it. Because if I didn't think it could be changed, I would just turn off the internet and just stay at home. But if it can be changed, but at the same time, it's going to take it's going to take a hit of that from changing, which usually has to be an act you did by yourself. So just like exercise doesn't feel good when you do it, but you adapt from it, right? You have to get out of your comfort zone from that sense of belonging in order to make that change. Now, if you're a politician, all these people that would refuse to stand up on that side, their livelihood depends on that belonging that they have because those are the votes, right? And then the under the table money that came from USAID. But it's yeah, that's exactly how it would work and how it would reinforce that behavior and how people get stuck in that.
And speaking of belonging, another thought I'd had, and you just uh, reminded me of it, is this is why I've used the sports analogies so frequently, is uh, another thing that gives us that dopamine hit, or and you use the sports analogy of making a like making a shot in basketball.
Mhm.
Achievement gives you a big dopamine hit.
Mhm.
Okay, well, here's a problem that we have in this virtual
Well,
world.
I'm going to add to that before you go on because this gets could get us back on the political too with Trump. Achievement plus validation of that achievement gives you a massive dopamine hit.
And I wonder how much of the dopamine chasing and perhaps dopamine crashing is the weak nature of that validation. Because what I mean by that
Hmm.
is if you are overly unhealthily invested in your sports team and they win, we did it. no, 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 dude, you were sitting on your couch
I've
watching.
already I've already
We
ranted on superstitions,
we didn't
wanting
do
to be
anything
part of the
here, man.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We
Yeah.
didn't do anything. Okay. They did it. Kudos to them. Okay. Um,
But no, it's not it is deeper than that though, because you follow that team and you want to believe in that team and you have a vested interest in your evaluation of the sport. And if you say my team is the best, you have made a declaration. And if your team does the best, you have validated your declaration. So you have validated your own decision making. This is why people say, oh, logic or feelings. People who are trying to think logically are motivated by feelings because it feels good to be right
mm.
and it feels bad to be wrong. So even if you're saying, well, I'm objective and logical, I'm not run by my feelings. Yes, you are, because if you're wrong on something, how bad do you feel about it? In fact, those are the
And,
people that feel the worst when they're wrong.
and my point about how ephemeral that is it's, if you've ever seen the movie The Money Pit, where Tom Hanks, I can't remember his wife, I can't remember who plays his wife in the movie, but they buy this house because it looks beautiful. And it's a nightmare. It needs so much renovations, and they end up sinking more and more and more money into it, and it almost ruins their marriage. And it's so the title, The Money Pit. You bought this because it looked good, but it was a house of cards. It wasn't real, and now it's destroying you.
Mhm.
Okay, good for you. You get that dopamine spike because you won that argument on the internet. So what? What did you actually accomplish? What did it lead to? Anything?
Mhm.
Anything other than you getting a temporary dopamine spike?
Well, and
So
then,
because
yeah.
because that achievement is so hollow, I think that's what leads to this dopamine chasing, because you have to. Because an actual real tangible achievement is going to make you feel so much better
Hmm.
than this hollowness.
Well, and that's where I always say reality always wins. You
Mm,
know, our perception of the world is individual for everybody. What I'm seeing on this computer screen as I'm talking to you is different than what you're seeing on that computer screen talking to me, even though it should be the same screen.
yeah.
You on the left, me on the right. All of the stuff in the background is all the noise that's coming in. We're seeing only about 16 bits of 16 million that are coming in, and my 16 bits are somewhat different than your 16 bits. But as a collective, what we call reality is where we all agree on that.
Mm.
And I think that's where the fatigue from the left came in is they've become so unreal that it can't be sustained by the collective consciousness. Uh,
Because they've been building on this house of cards. They just keep piling on more and more and more and more
mhm.
cards, chasing this, very temporary, you know, positive feeling. And there was almost never, I don't want to say never because you don't know, but almost never any there. There was almost never any underlying reality to give it any sort of foundation to build upon.
Well,
And,
yeah,
and the
yeah,
danger, of course, is that the hardcore MAGA movement is doing the exact same thing.
yeah. Well, and well, I would say no. I don't think this will take us to the Trump speech because it's not the MAGA movement that's doing the same thing. It's the
Mm,
people who backed MAGA, who people like Lindsay are calling the woke right now, who are
yes.
mad at MAGA or mad at that because it's not going conservative in the small c conservative enough. It's not doing the things that they thought he was going to do. And I'm like, he never promised those things. You were out of
Yes.
reality. You thought if the right wins, the extreme right was going to win. You were out of reality. We're on the left. When the left won, the extreme left won. And that happened for too long for everybody to be stuck in the matrix. Basically, this is how I know the matrix doesn't exist, because these things happen. We human all the time, and they were defying humanity for so long that human finally broke through again, and it resulted in fatigue, which is just tuning out and losing an election.
Well, let's watch a little bit of, we'll see how far we get into it, but let's watch some of the opening of the speech and you'll get my reaction in real time. And then we'll see if we can't unpack these things in a way that is both satisfactory and real.
Mm-hmm. All right. On that thought, sorry for the hiccup there. We're going to go. Oh, trigger warning. You're going to hear a man's voice that triggers a lot of people. But he was the one giving the speech. So we're going to go right into it. And you just say the word pause when you want me to pause. And if not, you can just talk over to comment too, because there's moments where they just clap and stuff too. All right. Oh, I'm the best pauser in the world. Always catch him in the good face. All right.
6 weeks
U.S.
ago,
state chants make me
I
want to
stood
see
beneath the
Hacksaw
dome
Jim
of the
Duggan come
Capitol
down the aisle.
and proclaimed the dawn of the golden age of America. From that moment on, it has been nothing but swift and
He said something in the very beginning that started that chant. And I guess they cut that out of this one.
Huh.
most successful era in the history of our country. We have accomplished more in 43 days than most administrations accomplished in 4 years or 8 years.
He's not lying.
And we are just getting started.
I mean, his whole style is braggadocious. That's been his style. I mean, that's part of his business motif. But he ain't wrong here.
Even if you compare it to his first term.
Yeah.
I return to this chamber tonight to report that America's momentum is back, our spirit is back, our pride is back, our confidence is back, and the American dream is surging bigger and better than ever before.
All right, you got to pause it there, though, because I'm already mildly annoyed. The problem with his style is that it leads you to a dopamine crash. Okay? Yes, on the one hand, you want to pump up your side, but on the other hand, if you promise too big and don't deliver, you're going to have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it is true that the economic problems we face are mostly due to the previous administration. Caveat that you kind of started it with the COVID response.
Mm-hmm.
That the bailouts, the subsidies, the loans that went along with the lockdowns,
yeah,
all just massively spiked inflation and it's really screwed up our economic system generally. It's also true that I don't want to get too far into the weeds about where I kind of disagree with the more Milton Friedman people, that I'm generally more free market libertarian, but I also think he's right in that, but what we have isn't free trade, so that needs to be addressed. And so in the long term, that could and should return jobs and capital to the US, which will help the American worker in the long term. But right now, nah, not really. We're not seeing
mm-hmm.
we're not seeing like take for example something I've been harping on with all these Doge revelations of all these contracts that are being canceled. Okay, where's that money going? Because we've seen billions of dollars so far cumulatively in wasteful spending and dodgy contracts that are being canceled, but that's not actually going to help the American taxpayer consumer unless that money goes back to the taxpayer in the form of a reduction in the budget so that we start to see a reduction in inflation.
But he's going to address that here later. I did get that far in his speech, but also they've thrown around a dividend. You're an investor in the United States, so you get a dividend when we save money.
Yeah. And this is something that I've seen some people comment on, because again, the more traditional hardcore libertarian free marketeers are like, that's a terrible idea. And in pure dollars and cents, yes, because that actually is that's why I brought up the lockdown response, is sending everyone a check because of the lockdown. That increased inflation, because that money has to come from somewhere. So yes, in pure dollars and cents, but that's why I started out with facts don't care about your feelings. Well, your feelings don't care about your facts.
Yeah.
And those dividend checks are important because you are getting people both financially and emotionally invested in what Doge is doing.
I remember what he said to open that was cut out. He comes out there kind of to get everybody fired up. He says, he introduces Speaker Johnson, JD Vance, and his wife Ivanka, and she gets a huge
Melania,
excuse me, Ivanka's his daughter. Yeah, she gets a huge standing ovation, and then he comes up to the mic and says, "We're back," and everybody starts cheering, and that's what got that big chant going. But yeah, he's a showman, that's for sure. But he does address some of what you were talking about, and we probably won't get that far today, but it involves tax cuts. So
the American dream is unstoppable, and our country is on the verge of a comeback, the likes of which the world has never witnessed and perhaps will never witness again. There's never been anything like it. The presidential election of November 5th was a mandate like has not been seen in many decades. We won all 7 swing states,
except
giving us an electoral college victory of 312 votes.
I mean,
or even Bush round 2.
Over 300 is a big deal.
Yeah.
Especially in a federal republic.
We won the popular vote by big numbers and won counties in our country.
And now the shenanigans begin.
Do you see the speaker shake his head there?
This is the tribal. I mean, I think this may be part of what Dad Sad was referring to is, you're only encouraging the tribalism with your tribalism, and you're only going to make the other side worse, and thereby make your own side worse. So the Democrats' response to this, both in the chamber and out of the chamber, was childish. And any fair and rational analysis of that would be, you're throwing a tantrum, stop it. But no, it's being celebrated by way too many people because of what Gads had said.
Well, and just back to the main point of this, the start of this, you don't think he's getting a dopamine hit right now?
Yeah. And won counties in our country, 2,700 to 525, on a map that reads almost completely red for Republican.
I mean, yeah, there you go. There's your dopamine hit. He's doubling down because of your nonsense.
In history, more Americans believe that our country is headed in the right direction than the wrong direction. In fact, it's an astonishing record, 27-point swing, the most ever.
Since they've been doing polls.
Yeah. Well, that tells you just how bad the previous administration was and what people thought of it.
Yeah. Likewise, small business optimism saw its single largest one-month gain ever recorded, a 41-point jump.
Well, and that's important since something like 80% of them people are employed by what is called a small business.
In the House and to cease any further disruptions.
Repeat that. I couldn't hear you over the gavel.
That point is especially important because I haven't looked at these numbers in a while, but something like 80% of American employees are employed by what is classified as a small business.
Yeah, and
And
the classification is 100 employees or
100 or
under.
less,
Yeah,
yeah, is what is classified as a small business. And um I don't know if that number includes, but it could be even more than that if you include franchises, because a franchise is technically a small business, even though it
Mhm.
is under the umbrella of a very large corporation. But if
Yeah, it is included. Uh,
because like your local McDonald's definitely has less than
mhm.
100 employees.
But if you look at your paycheck at that local McDonald's, it actually has the name of the franchisee
Yeah, that's
on
okay.
it.
I
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about that, but yeah, you're right. Is the franchisee and whatever, you know, sole proprietorship or company they set up to be a franchisee. And so, you know, that's a big deal, that and the optimism part of it is a big deal, because you're not going to start a business or expand a business if you think if you think bad economic times are right around the corner,
Hmm. Well, and I can
because you're
speak from
putting a lot of
experience.
capital into that. Yeah.
I can speak from experience because 2025 was peak year for the previous Trump administration's tax cuts. Remember, they went through 2025.
Mhm.
And so that's these things build up, and the crescendo is the last year of it. And they just revoted and passed the new cycle of it, which is good. But yeah, this was the best year for taxes I've had for my business in a long
Mhm.
time, because everything, I mean, one of the things they made easier was kind of more of an expansive write-off process, which is good because there's so many things that go into your business that aren't just like, oh, I bought a piece of equipment, or all of these things, and it was fantastic,
you,
and
you
I'm
know
glad they extended it.
it is interesting that we have now had to pause and have the Speaker of the House remind the Democrats of the decorum of the House, because I was just thinking, he said, I don't even remember what he said, which is probably a good example of why it's good that I didn't comment on it. He said a couple things earlier that I could have quibbled with, I could have commented on, but why? What would be the point? What would be back to our where we were talking about the point of this is it would be an ephemeral false dopamine spike of I was right, I won an argument. What, with yourself? So what's the point? The Democrats are so, and the mob that they keep inflaming are so obsessed with resisting their enemy, they can't pick their shots. It's what he just said is important and good and a big effing deal. You're not listening. You don't care what he's saying. You care about the performative aspect of opposing him.
Yeah,
And it
it's
makes you
not what's
look
done, it's
ridiculous.
who did it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to Gadsad's point, if they cured cancer, you would, yell at them for destroying cancer cells. How dare they?
That's your warning. Members are engaging in willful and continuing breach of decorum, and the chair is prepared to direct the Sergeant at Arms to restore order to the joint session.
Pause it again. Pause it again. I don't remember exactly when this was, but because I'm a political nerd and I've been paying attention to this so long, and most of you out there are normal, well-adjusted people with better things to do with your time, you probably don't remember that in one of Obama's State of the Union addresses, a single Republican shouted out something I don't remember if this was exactly what he said, but something to the effect of "you lie" or "liar." That was all he did. And it was so outrageous that there was a week or two of the media cycle obsessing over that one Republican in that one moment of shouting out "you lie" to Obama during the State of the Union, and how dare he. And of course it was racist because Obama is allegedly black. And now look where we've come. The same people freaking out about that are going overboard, throwing a childish tantrum because of who's saying and what he said. And to that Republican's point, what Obama said was a verifiable lie. Because it was about Obamacare, and a couple years later he would laugh about it.
Also keep in mind, it's just a couple of State of the Unions ago that they removed father of someone who died in Afghanistan during the withdrawal because he shouted something during the speech. So here we go.
Mr. Green, take your seat. Take your seat,
Green,
sir.
Isn't that the congressman that
Take your
was
seat.
doing the impeachment?
Al Green.
Yeah,
that's who it was. And
Finding that members continue to engage in willful,
standing up, shaking his cane,
disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the sergeant at arms to restore order.
And so he was, I think, the only one who was actually escorted out. Not that it stopped the outbursts. I don't remember who it was who said that you can't tell this from the audio from TV because Trump is mic'd, but someone posted today that in the room it was actually hard to hear Trump because there was that many outbursts. It was that continuous.
Members are directed to uphold and maintain decorum in the House.
He's shaking his cane. Is he trying to channel his, what is it? Burr. Wasn't it Aaron Burr that whacked the other congressperson in the head with a gun?
It was, oh crap, who was it?
Aaron Burr got in the duel with Hamilton.
He got in the duel. I'm trying to remember. Yeah. There was a Southern Democrat. He wasn't even in the same house. I don't remember if he was a representative or a senator. And there was an abolitionist Republican giving a speech on the floor. And this Democrat crossed over to the other chamber and beat this guy nearly to death in Congress. And admirers from around the South sent the guy new canes.
House. Mr. President, you continue.
Thank you. Over the past 6 weeks, I have signed nearly 100 executive orders and taken more than 400 executive actions, a record, to restore common sense, safety, optimism, and wealth all across our wonderful land. The people elected me to do the job, and I'm doing it.
I mean, that is true for all the people freaking out. It's almost everything he's doing is stuff he explicitly campaigned on doing. All the AOCs standing up there screaming, "Nobody elected Musk." No, but all the voters knew Musk was on the team.
By many that the first month of our presidency, it's our presidency, is the most successful in the history of our nation. By many.
That was a good appeal to vote of, hey, it's us.
Yeah.
We did this.
And what makes it even more impressive is that, do you know who number 2 is? George Washington. How about that? How about that? I don't know about that list, but we'll take it. Within hours of taking the oath of office, I declared a national emergency on our southern border, and I deployed the U.S. military and Border Patrol to repel the invasion of our country. And what a job they've done. As a result, illegal border crossings last month were by far the lowest ever recorded, ever.
It's almost like we had the power to do that all along.
Yeah. And remember that Biden was running around saying, I can't do anything. Congress has to act. You're a liar.
They heard my words and they chose not to come. Much easier that way. In comparison, under Joe Biden, the worst president in American history, there were hundreds of thousands of illegal crossings a month, and virtually all of them.
On that specific issue, he's probably right.
The most
Overall,
incompetent, probably, but worst. I mean, you still have Woodrow Wilson, who was downright evil, I would say.
Including murderers, drug dealers, gang members, and people from mental institutions and insane asylums were released into our country.
Did you hear that?
What?
Did you hear that person in the back row?
Did someone say that's where you belong?
That's where you belong. Yeah, so you heard the same thing.
Would want to do that. This is my 5th such speech to Congress. And once again, I look at the Democrats in front of me, and I realize there is absolutely nothing I can say to make them happy or to make them stand or smile or applaud. Nothing I can do. I could find a cure to the most devastating disease, a disease that would wipe out entire nations, or announce the answers to the greatest economy in history, or the stoppage of crime to the lowest levels ever recorded. And these people sitting right here will not clap, will not stand, and certainly will not cheer for these astronomical achievements. They won't do it, no matter what. Five times I've been up here. It's very sad, and it just shouldn't be this way.
Pause again. I think
he
that's
just made
actually,
your point that you said earlier.
I think that's a good place to end it, because it really doesn't matter what he says in the next hour and 30 minutes that's left in this video, because he's absolutely right. And so that is why so far there were some moments of kind of red meat to his base, but I also think he's doing a good job of, I'm not talking to these people here and their rabid supporters. I'm talking to you people out there who are on that meme that you showed earlier of, who was it who created that? The guy standing there and the guy to his left just sprints off to the side.
Oh, Colin Wright. Yeah.
Colin Wright. He's speaking to those people in the middle. Yeah, the guys who are always kind of there in between, and now they're a lot closer to the right than the left because the left's lost his mind. I think he's doing a good job of speaking to the me there in this meme of the guy who was just left of center, and now he's fairly to the right of center because the center has moved so dramatically.
Let's go a couple seconds more, because if this is the right spot, he actually one-ups your analysis here.
But the other reason I think that is a good moment is because he is something that the MAGA crowd has done a pretty good job of unpacking is why does Trump, of all people, represent such an existential crisis to the hardcore left? And yeah, I mean, we could spend multiple episodes on that.
Yeah.
But he does, and I think that's important.
So Democrats sitting before me, for just this one night, why not join us in celebrating so many incredible wins for America?
That's where I wanted to get to, because he extends the olive branch. And it's just, I think that was probably the best moment of the whole speech that I've seen so far. I haven't seen all the way to the end, but
that is good. I think that reinforces he's speaking to the me who's now right of center, because the center has moved so far, because he knows darn well the people in that room, they're not going to take that olive branch. They can't, because they have boxed themselves in so much, they can't take it and survive politically. And their most rabid supporters are too invested emotionally to take that branch. But there are plenty of people, all the people on that meme, that's who he's talking to ultimately. I think he has to know that is, I'm saying this, I'm using you as a prop, and to Gadzad's point, you're letting him.
Yeah, I do want to, because I did watch some of it last night, and I'm trying to get through the rest of it today. But there was one moment, and this is a different camera angle than the one I was watching last night, because the one I was watching last night showed the whole room pretty much the whole time. And there was one thing he said where one person on the left got up and started clapping. And I couldn't remember what that moment was because I was so tired and just kind of trying to get through it. And I want to timestamp that to figure out who that person was and what the issue was that they got up and clapped for, because it was like it was like the old picture everybody sees where everybody's doing the Hitler salute, the Roman salute to Hitler, and there's that one person with his arms crossed. It was the inverse of that, because everybody's sitting there with their arms crossed, but one person is up clapping. And I want to see who that congressperson was and what the issue was that got them to break form. Because that's one thing about that party is you don't break form. That's why Tulsi Gabbard was pushed out, because she broke form while she was in Congress. And it was over something dumb. She just criticized one thing Obama did in his foreign policy, and she was basically kicked out of the party.
Yeah, and to the hardcore MAGA, that is what you are doing when you freak out and immediately demand Bondi's resignation. And yeah, it was a flub. It was, to his point, especially compared to how rocky his first administration started off. And yet they have been very focused, and there has been no rake stepping. For those of you who didn't watch American Looney Tunes cartoons growing up, or Three Stooges, you step on the rake and you hit yourself in the face, right? They weren't self-owning until that Epstein moment. That was the first rake step.
And it's a completely, everybody's like, oh, we're not going to find out because they're just as corrupt. We're not going to find out because they've probably destroyed everything.
Yeah. Can we calm down and wait and see?
Yeah.
Now we should be skeptical. We should hold them to account, but I think they have done enough to earn the benefit of the doubt, at least, at least for a short term, but this is the other point I really wanted to make with this dopamine chasing is I've said this before, one of the reasons I only have X on my computer, I don't have it on my phone, is because I don't want the temptation to constantly be doom scrolling or to constantly be lashing out to get that brief, ephemeral, temporary, unsatisfactory dopamine hit. And I have tried to translate that, expand on that to even when I'm sitting here on my browser scrolling through X, is multiple times I have clicked reply, and sometimes I even type out a reply, and then I think, is this a worthwhile thought? Does this add anything to the discussion? Is this, is this pithy? Is this insightful? Is this worthwhile? No? All right, delete. I don't need to add to the all I'm doing is adding to the noise. I'm not adding to the discussion. So that is something we all need to try harder to do, is pick your shot. Is this a point worth making? As I said, we only watched 10 minutes there, and I could have quibbled with a number of things of, well, actually, but is it necessary? Is it worthwhile? Is it productive?
Yeah. Well, the sad thing is, in this day and age, especially with things like X and, YouTube, and they're all connected, because if our X account went up, our YouTube would probably go up too. And is the people who constantly say shit are the ones who get the most followers. And if you look back at even the people you like the best, and you just click on their page and scroll through everything they said, you're going to be like, that was stupid and pointless. That was stupid and pointless. That was stupid. Oh, that was good. That was stupid and pointless. That was stupid and pointless. Oh, that was good. And those are the people that spread around as much. So, part of me wants to do more of that, but I'm like you, when I'm scrolling through, and I'm like, oh, I have something really good to say here, I will post it. But unless I have something like that I feel is a little bit groundbreaking to what's going on there, I don't say anything and just keep
Yep.
scrolling and going.
That's what I try and do on X is first of all, do I have something worthwhile to say? And selfishly, secondarily, can I throw up a link to one of our episodes to try and get a little bit of engagement there? Is that's what I'm doing on X, along with just, all right, what are people saying and what are they talking about?
Well, let's go ahead and close out there. I've got great news. While we were on our little break, which was a hiccup for you guys, but it was a little 15-minute break for us to do coffee refills and take a bathroom break and stuff. I looked at our comments from our last Wheel of Time episode, and Scott's back. Hey, welcome back, Scott. And we have another a new follower as well. So we're no longer 69. That's sad. But so now let's go to the big numbers now. So go ahead and push us to the big numbers. Let's get to 100. Like I said, 1,000. I think it's 1,000. It might be 500. I think they might have changed it at some point but when we started, it was 1,000. Either way, we're a long way from there. But live shows, being able to post it, to just come on and respond to comments and communicate, that would be awesome. Especially if an event like last night, we could have gone on and just done that live with the Trump speech and been able to comment along and listen to what y'all think, especially our international folks, because they're kind of outside looking in, and it's always good. It's always refreshing because we do have that nationalism in ourselves to some degree. Even if you're the worst leftist in the world, you still have some nationalism, or you wouldn't live here. But so to get that outside perspective, it's really refreshing as well. So we'll get to your comments next time, Scott. Isomorphic, I think you commented on the last one too, and keep it coming.
Yep. Next time we are talking about land fear and overanalyzing, psychoanalyzing her and looking into, and I'm gonna rant about oh geez, Isomorphic. I'm annoyed that you told me about Sanderson saying that in his head he'd intended that she faked her own death. And I'm like, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, BS, that is some BS, and we'll talk about why. We'll talk about why on Saturday. And then I think the next we're getting close to yeah. So
12 days.
Saturday the 8th, we'll talk about land fear, and then next week, Thursday the 13th, we'll see how many episodes they drop at once, and then that's what we'll be talking about after that. Oh joy.
Yeah, and I'm going to be out of town that weekend. So do you want to try to hit that Friday then?
Yeah, let's go ahead and hit at least episode 1 on Friday and just see how awful it is.
Oh,
I have some homework for Scott and Isomorphic. If you can find this, I tried looking for it and I couldn't find it. But speaking of Wheel of Time awfulness, according to Shad, whose channel is Shadversity, and he's a regular on FNT now, and he has said a couple of times, and I've tried to find this, he has said that Rafe Judkins in an interview said that the best way to deal with trolls is to turn their favorite character gay.
oh.
And that speaks so much to the awfulness of modern storytelling.
What if your favorite character was already gay?
I don't know. Are you straight now? That's some hard. That's the meme of the person getting the loading signal stuck in their head because they don't know what to do now. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, if y'all could find that, I would love to see that interview in full. I have not been able to find that. But that would be eye-opening and interesting to go along with when we start talking about the series when season 3 drops. All right, well, let's look forward to that, shall we?
I'm more looking forward to the land fear discussion because I'm sure we'll have an Amber Heard meme for that.
Perfect.
All right, see y'all then.